Next up, we have big Travis Jones out of UConn, the defensive tackle, who was a very fun guy to watch. And I will say that was for a variety of reasons, but mainly for me, it was just because I enjoy good old-fashioned nose technique and one technique play, and that was what Travis Jones brought to the table. He was not a very flashy guy necessarily. If you're looking for someone who's just gonna, beat guys with these quick pass rush moves and get a ton of sacks as a 3 technique or even as an edge rusher at times, it's not what you're going to get out of Travis. Travis, big old guy that you're going to plop in the middle of your defense, most likely, and just let him control gaps, right? And in that regard, just going through some of my notes and my various grades for him here in terms of how did I get out and come out, I should say, to the 80.08. The first thing I noted was absurdly strong hands and initial punch. In that regard, in terms of the ability to anchor against the run and just strength at the point of attack, I gave him a 19.5 out of 20, which, for reference, everybody loves to talk about, say, Jordan Davis's ability to anchor and play the run. I gave him a 17.75 for reference. So I thought Travis Jones did a better job of controlling the line of scrimmage and not getting driven back than even say Jordan Davis, who is a top half of the first round type prospect. My second note, an absolute anchor in the run game, eating double teams with ease, and despite being the focal point on the UConn front seven, he had very consistent good hand placement on a play-to-play basis. I thought he had pretty good quickness, and then I kind of wrote as a qualifier for his size. No, he's not, straight up just the fastest guy, but for being a 330-pound defensive tackle, he was rather quick. I thought that was supported by his combine measurements. Now, one thing that I do want to note about the combine that was interesting is, he had actually shed a little bit of weight between what he was listed at on the UConn site as well as at the combine. So, it said his playing weight was 333. Came in at the combine at 325. Is that a big deal? No, but maybe he wants to expand his horizons and maybe not just be, that nose tackle or that one technique. Maybe he wants to try and get a little bit quicker, test a little bit better, make himself a little bit more money in that regard, and then, potentially have some fluidity in terms of maybe he could be a 4 tech and a 3-4, etc., etc. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it's possible when you have a guy just casually cut 8 pounds out of season. I thought that was interesting. But in terms of the numbers themselves, the combine measurables and testing results, 4.92 40-yard dash. Absurd at 325 pounds. He had a 4.58 shuttle, a 7.33 3-cone, which was very impressive, a 9-foot 2-inch broad, which again, very impressive for his size and weight, and the vertical 28.5 inches is, that's impressive as well. I didn't always see that athleticism popping off the tape. One of the first notes I gave was there just wasn't a lot of upside, I didn't think, as a pass rusher, but did a good job decreasing the depth of the pocket, unsurprisingly, with his bull rushes, particularly versus single teams, and that was, one of his main contributions, I should say, one of the main contributions he gave as a pass rusher, just making the quarterback have less room to step up in the pocket, and a lot of times that was able to help out, right? If you're deflating the pocket and you're a nose tackle and you're doing it on a consistent basis, ultimately you're doing your team a lot of good in terms of helping those edge rushers get the job done and helping your 3 technique get the job done, etc., etc. Just sort of a ripple effect going out beyond your play, just as a result of even forcing a center to give up a yard or 2 off the ball. In terms of some of the other weaknesses, I thought he had limited range as a tackler. I think that goes without saying. Didn't necessarily have, the best. I would say he didn't necessarily have the best agility. I know he had a great 3-cone time. I don't know how he had it, but on film I didn't always see just the best, we'll say, change of direction ability as well as just lateral agility. Sometimes he would do a good job shuffling up and down the line of scrimmage while he was holding up blockers, but just on his own, in terms of movement ability, I didn't always think it was necessarily great at times. Part of that might have been due to my next concern, which was perhaps not a great motor, or some conditioning concerns. And I say that not that it's not important, but as a nose tackle, I don't know how much you're necessarily expected to make plays, say, out on the edge, right? You could try to run after plays all you want, but if you're 325 pounds, you're almost never going to get there, right? So, was it more of a conditioning issue that was kind of, I don't want to say slowing down his play, but he was playing a ton of snaps. Whereas Jordan Davis, for example, on the Georgia front seven, was in a largely rotational role. Travis Jones was out there. It felt like as many snaps as humanly possible for the UConn defense, at least for him in terms of humanly possible. And it felt like that was wearing on him as maybe games went on. So I don't want to say he didn't have the best motor, but maybe he didn't have the best conditioning, right? One or the other in that regard, and potentially a little bit of a mix of both. And then again, I just had another note about him not necessarily making a ton of plays down the line of scrimmage laterally. He's going to control the A gaps with his absurdly strong hands and that ability to anchor, but even just shedding and making a play in, say, B gap, right? Like, that's not going to be necessarily an overly frequent thing. Just in terms of some of the grades specifically, just going through them very quickly. Besides anchoring and strength at the point of attack, which I said was 19.5, I gave him a 12.75 in terms of pass rush ability, again, because of his ability to deflate the pocket. That's out of 20, though, so that did certainly put a slight damper in his grade. In terms of the explosiveness, I gave him a 10.25 out of 15. Again, I thought it could sometimes be inconsistent, but again, for his size, just the straight line speed was rather impressive. The straight line get off, it was solid, very solid, I should say. Block shedding, I gave him an 8 out of 10 because, again, just that the strong hands, he could put you wherever he wanted to put you if you were single blocking him with just about anybody and everybody that he faced, it felt like. And in that regard, it's tough to knock a guy down in his block shedding that much, when even though there's not a ton of glamour to it necessarily. It's just a rough and tough in a phone booth, get out of my way type thing, and Jones is able to do that quite well. Otherwise, I gave him, as I said, a little bit of a lower motor grade at a 6.5 out of 10, lower finishing and tackling grade at 2.75 out of 5, because again, that lack of upside there, I would say. I gave him a 4.25 in terms of block recognition. I thought he did a very good job just quickly noticing what the play was, what the offense was trying to do, and how he could put himself in best position to impact that play positively, right? Most of the time it was just getting hands on these interior offensive linemen and keeping them off linebackers, or keeping them from reestablishing the line of scrimmage a yard or two downfield, keeping them from being able to have a clean pocket that the QB can easily step up into. It felt like all of those are things that he was able to impact once he recognized what the blocks were, which I thought he did quite well. In terms of the leverage, I gave him a 3.75. There wasn't a ton there. I thought sometimes, like I said, later in games things would start to wane a little bit, but for a guy who was 6'4", I thought he did a generally good job getting low and engaging his whole body and whatnot. I gave him a 4.75 on size, and these are my two raw sort of combine derived grades. 4.75 out of 5 on size, and then a 4.5 out of 5 on athleticism, which that one I'm hesitant about, because I didn't see that all the time on the field, and I question how much of it is just the fact that he lost weight, got in better shape, worked on those tests for 4 months, and then afterwards is going to kind of return to his in-season form, which was a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit less athletic perhaps. But regardless, like I said, I go off the combine scores, and that's why I gave him what I gave him. So put all of that in together, came out to a 77 raw grade, multiply that by the 4% position premium, 80.08. And I think in that regard, that puts him right at the top of my second round grades. And I'm filming this between rounds 1 and day 2, and I would say he's one of the better remaining players right there at the top of the board. Personally, I had him graded higher than Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle out of Georgia, and he just went to Green Bay a little bit ago. I think, big Travis Jones, he shouldn't be too far behind, if the NFL teams are watching the same film I was, because it's invaluable to a defense to get a big hog up the middle that can just clog gaps, right? And it felt like that's what Travis Jones was. But at the same time, he wasn't always one-dimensional. Excuse me. He was able to deflate the pocket. He was able to toss guys with his hands and occasionally make a play inside, right? He was able to have a pretty consistent get off, good consistent hand placement, an ability to deconstruct blocks easily. Could at times, I have in my notes, surprise you with a quick pass rush move, and that was something that I thought was impressive. The quickness of his hands was there, but the frequency by which he was throwing them wasn't always top notch, which is understandably so, right? Because like I said, that just wasn't necessarily his game at his weight. Even if he did have a clean win, he wouldn't necessarily always be able to capitalize on it. But there were definitely a couple quick sort of clubs and rips he was hitting guys with, but more often than not, it was just overpowering them and just using his strength to get the best of them. But with that being said, if you thought this video was the best of me, I don't necessarily agree. I was stumbling and bumbling there for a little bit, but if you thought it was a good video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, so that way you're always in the loop with my future uploads, because for this one, I'm mic'd up, now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video, and hopefully if your team got Travis Jones, you are excited for you're excited to see him clogging A gaps near you.